Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this week. I'm Liz Mangus, Literacy Specialist at Saddleback Educational Publishing, and we're trying something a little bit different this week. Our webinar is a couple of hours later than it normally is, so hopefully that helps out some of you who would like to join live but haven't been able to because you've been at work or at school. So welcome to those of you who are logging in. Please find the control bar, which is at the bottom of your web browser window. That is where you are going to find the chat, the Q&A, and the live transcript option. I think the most important of those three is the chat because that is how we talk to each other throughout the webinar. Just please make sure that when you're using the chat that you select all panelists and attendees, or your little chat drop-down might actually say everybody or everyone. It just depends on which version of Zoom you're running. Just please make sure that you select one of those options to make sure that everybody can see your comments. And then if you have a question, you can go ahead and put that in the Q&A area and we'll kind of address those as they come in. And for subtitles, go ahead and click live transcript and then select show subtitles. We are on Twitter, and by we, I mean Saddleback and Dr. Cash and Dr. McKnight. Don't be shy, follow us, go onto Twitter, say hello, let everybody know that you are joining us today for this great session. We'll get started in just a few minutes. 5 o'clock Eastern time is when we'll get started. So let's say hi to Katie and Richard. Hello, friends, welcome back.
Hello. I was just thinking, Liz, you've developed quite the radio voice.
Oh gosh.
And I see that we have folks from Canada and Indonesia, so we're officially international today. We always get excited about that.
Yeah.
So we're on the other side of the globe. Yeah.
And I've got my football. You know how sports minded I am. I got my baseball jersey on because tonight is the last home game for the Minnesota Twins.
Do you even know which league the Twins are in? If it's an American League or National League?
I'm just going because this is a Prince game. So they're honoring Prince at tonight's game. And so that's the big reason I'm going.
You're in it for the arts integration. The arts and culinary integration.
Yes. I love that. Oh my gosh, I haven't been
from Edmonton. Oh, cool. Okay,
I haven't been to a baseball game, and I'm jealous. I haven't been to a baseball game in I can't even tell you a really long time. So
I obviously I don't go to the game for the sport of it.
Neither do I,
but I go because I just love being in we've got a fairly new stadium here in Minneapolis, and it's always fun to just watch the crowds and I do like baseball. I know how it's played. And I do have my favorites.
The Twins are in the American League because they have a designated hitter for the pitcher. The pitcher doesn't bat in the American League. That's the biggest difference.
Katie's a big sports fan, especially with hockey. I mean, don't talk about hockey with her because she'll take you down.
Most men are surprised by my hockey knowledge.
Interesting. I didn't know that, Katie. Well, we'll have to talk hockey next time. Yeah. You and me.
Hockey. So all the
Canadians are all revving up over there.
Yeah, they're all like in the chat area, like chatting. There's some real good hockey up there in Canada, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. The Canadians can move that puck around the ice real nice.
Okay.
We are going to get to a really.
We are actually going to do a webinar today.
Exactly.
Speaking of, let me do my job and keep this thing on track. Okay. We are here to talk about critical and creative thinking through reading, writing, and speaking. I know that this is a very important topic. We all want to know how we can engage our students to think critically and creatively. So Katie and Richard are here to tell us how to do it. Right? They're going to tell us exactly what to do. I don't know about that.
We're going to get it all in an hour.
Yeah, all in an hour.
All in an hour. So,
but there is some excellent information in this webinar. Katie and Richard are regulars here, so you probably know them already. So I decided today I'm going to skip the big formal thing where I actually read your bios because I just think, guys, they're on every 6 weeks in case you didn't know. But just so you know, they are both national, international consultants. They have been in the field of education for, I don't know if I should tell them this, 30 plus years. They are authors. They are award winning at what they do. And so I just want to share with you, this is one of Katie's books. It's the Literacy and Learning Centers for the Big Kids. She has a newer one out that's grammar focused, but this is great if you teach grades 4 through 12 and you want to implement centers and know how that works. If you have older kids, great resource. And then Richard's book, I believe this is still your latest, yes? Or
Yes.
do you have another one? Okay, so this is the latest, Self-Regulation in the Classroom, helping students learn how to learn. Love this book. Love them both, actually. I love all the things. So welcome back. I'm going to let you take it from here. And thanks for joining us, everybody, at this later than usual webinar.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Okay.
Katie,
Here we go.
I got
control
pilot.
here.
You got control here. There you go.
I'm the Vanna of
a
the
lovely
show
Vanna
today.
White. Yes,
Yeah, there we go.
And you know what we're going to be doing during this session is I'm going to start off with breaking down this idea of critical thinking. I'll mention a little bit about creative thinking as well. And then Katie is going to be the one that's actually going to show you how to implement it within the literacy format. Katie, that next slide, the one there with Margaret Mead right there, children must be taught how to think, not what to think. I think that is probably the foundation of what we're talking about today. Back in the turn of the last couple of centuries, when you went to school, that is where you learned. Okay, you had to go to school to learn something because it was either in the teacher's head or it was in the textbooks in front of the teacher. Well, that doesn't exist anymore in today's world. In today's world, kids can get just about anything they want to get right here off their cell phones. So we have got to consider other ways to get kids to learn how to think. And when kids are passive, they're not able to become complete citizens of the world because they are the ones that are just answering the questions. So Katie, let's go to that next slide there. And this is what is critical thinking. It's an ordered, structured way of thinking. It's coming up with reason. It's coming up with understanding. It's about the thoughtful process. Now, creativity is not necessarily the opposite of critical thinking. Creativity also requires open-mindedness, also requires observation, also requires that constant assessment, and also requires to be reasonable, to be possible. And so when Katie and I do workshops on creative thinking, using creativity as in creative dramatics or improv in the classroom, these are things that we're finding that kids are developing. They're developing problem-solving skills as they are being creative. Creative and crazy are a very fine line. So we want to keep kids on the creative side, not just on the crazy side. So critical thinking is much more structured, usually comes to one particular endpoint, where creativity is less structured and will come to multiple possibilities, multiple possible endings. Okay, so the next slide there. And so Katie's driving the bus. I'm the one doing the looking. So you can think of it this way. It's really about the acronym CER: claim, evidence, and reasoning. So when we're doing critical thinking, we make a claim, we find the evidence to support our claims, and then we back it up with the reasoning. So take us on to the next one, Katie. And essential questioning is one of the ways that we can not only infuse creativity into the classroom, but also ensure that we are addressing that thing which is called critical thinking. So essential questioning, as you see, there are all those big words that are floating around there in essential questioning. A couple of things I do want to point out, that it transcends content and disciplines. Good essential questioning does not necessarily focus in on a particular content area. The better essential questions will require kids to think beyond the content, what I call divergent thinking. That's the creativity, the thinking beyond, thinking outside of. It really requires kids to think. It's not something that's easily answered. It's not something that you can have there right at your fingertips for the answer. And after one book, you're able to answer that question. And it really should be that which guides our instruction. Unfortunately, what guides instruction in many cases are objectives. And I want to caution you, an objective is short-lived. An essential question is long-term. So we want to get kids to stop thinking of learning as a bit, as a piece, as a chunk, one chunk at a time. We want them to think more overtly and more divergently across different disciplines. And Katie, show the next slide here. These are some essential questions that I've crafted, and I want you to recognize only one is really specific. How is mathematics used to represent change over time? But if you note, each one of these has a concept embedded within this. And I know Katie's going to go into the idea of conceptual levels of thinking within literature. Oftentimes in literature, what you call what is called a concept are the themes of novels. That's what you find in literature. So as you see here, I really like to form essential questions using how, which is a procedural level, and the why, which is the reasoning level. That requires kids then to produce evidence to support their claim. If you use who, what, when, where type questions, those are factual level questions. Those are answerable within a page or two of the content. So what I want kids to do is think deeply. And Katie and I were just talking about this before we came on. Even kindergartners can think deeply with very simple text. So if I read the story of Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Okay, well, why did Jack and Jill have to go up to get the pail of water from the top of the mountain? And why did Jack fall down? When it says he broke his crown, what do you think a crown means? Is it a crown like a king or a queen's crown? So we want to ask those deeper level of questions with our kids. Okay, next one, Katie. Oh, and Katie does say, Dr. Seuss is one of those powerful resources to think about. So I'm going to turn this over to Katie now, because she's going to share all kinds of interesting stuff here. And I'm going to monitor the chat.
Yeah. And, Richard, there's a good question that was, why don't we address that first before I link this? The question was, how do you deal with East Asian ESL students? Focus on memorizing for exams and less on critical thinking due to hierarchical Confucian educational system. And I know that you've done a lot of work like in Indonesia and South Korea,
yes,
and have firsthand knowledge of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are difficulties when we only want kids to regenerate information. That doesn't necessarily create solid thinkers. Many of my friends are university folk, and they will tell me over and over and over again that when students coming from especially Asian countries will come in very, very well versed in content. They've got a lot of background knowledge of content, meaning they can regurgitate a lot of factual information. Where they suffer is when it comes to creative thoughts and critical reasoning, because they're not challenged to do that. My suggestion is the more you ask deeper level questions, the more solid that factual information becomes, and it becomes more resilient. So again, let's go back to the story of Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Well, okay, what does the word fetch mean? And why did they go to the top of the hill? In most cases, wells are at the bottom of a hill. because wells are deep underground. So why did they go up a hill to do that? So, there are all kinds of reasons why we want to ask deeper level questions, not just that factual level question. And that is a cultural standpoint in many places where it's just about the facts. It's not about thinking. But we have to understand the world has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. Anything you need to know is probably faster to be responded to on your phone than it is being able to regurgitate up that amount of information. So my suggestion is teach critical thinking strategies, teach creativity. It doesn't mean that you eliminate the other formats, but you infuse those formats within the structure that you currently have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And the other thing too, here's a great little statistic is that, the mark of a great student in my generation, I know Richard's in that generation too. We were the
earlier.
We were the last group in college who pounded out papers on an electric typewriter. Right. And one of the things, the mark of a great student was the amount of references that I had in my bibliography, because what that meant is that I went in and I searched for great information and went into microfiche and microfilm and remember the periodic guide to literature, not the periodic guide to elements, I almost said that, but going into those things and looking. So the mark of a great student was being able to search for information. And now we have so much information. Now the mark of a good student is, can you discern and discriminate and develop new ideas about it? And that's different. So I would say that it's even more rigorous today than probably in my generation in a lot of ways. I would make that argument. Right. And then here's another interesting fact, is that the amount of recorded information in the last 20 years is equivalent, and it's actually more, it's exceeded it, than all of the information that has preceded it. So, thinking of caveman writing on the walls till about 20 years ago, and about 2000, what we have 2000 to 221 is more than what we had previously. And that's staggering. Right. Now, not all of it is good information, but, nevertheless, we have it. Anyway.
And Katie, by the way, it's cave person.
Cave person, that's right. Or person of cave. And is probably how it should be, right? Okay, so promise we'll get back. Okay, so why great questions and inquiry matter for reading and writing? So I've been actually exploring this quite a bit, because I keep hearing and seeing the argument for grade level text, no matter what, grade level text. And I have to say that as a researcher in reading and literacy, I get squirrely about that. Whenever there is an argument made like that, where it's just one thing. So we keep hearing about science of reading right now. And most often I hear science of reading equated to phonics, instruction, and phonemic awareness. Well, those are two parts of the science of reading, of that corpus of knowledge that we have. And so the argument that's made about grade level text, and I don't disagree with it, but I think we're getting myopic, and that's what has to relate to the questions and the inquiry, is that the argument that's made is that lower performing students of lower socioeconomic backgrounds are not exposed to as much grade level text or as much frequency as higher performing students, or students in a higher socioeconomic class. Okay, I don't disagree with that, but I think there's a big piece that's missing. Yes, grade level text for instructional level, mentoring, demonstration of strategies, how I think about text, how I use text, how I answer questions and inquiry within the disciplines using text. But it gets to the questions. And what we know, lots of studies, actually Guthrie and his co-authors in the Journal of Learning, like back in about 10 years ago, about 2009, wrote about this. And differentiation of text is important too. It's a yes and, it's not an either or. Because if you have great questions, what we know from the research as well is that great questions and inquiry, they are catalysts for engagement, kids having deeper levels of comprehension in their reading, more motivation to read, and they're also reading a wider variety of texts. So I would argue, yes, grade level of texts on an instructional level, but they have to be rooted in great questions, great inquiry types of questions. That's what matters. And there's a significant body of research that supports that as well. And I think that's one really critical piece that's missing from the grade level text argument. And we also know that there's tons of studies. Fred Hess did one in the 90s out of Northwestern University. That was one of the first ones that students of lower socioeconomic background, kids who are lower performing, get asked low level questions. So to go back to Richard's Jack and Jill example, an example of that might be, who went first, Jack or Jill? Where did they go? What were they carrying? Jill went down the hill first, true or false? Those are very low level questions. They don't spur questioning, inquiry, why it matters to read that story about Jack and Jill and that verse. So we want those great questions. And so, oops, I'm trying to click that. So the focus really of the questions and inquiry must be also the focus for the reading and writing. And I'm going to show you how that works in just a moment. And so that high level thinking engages students in critical thinking about the text that they're reading. That's what deepens comprehension. Again, significant body of research that supports that. So when we have those great questions, that's what actually spurs students to dig more deeply in their text. And then relevance. It's gotta matter. It's gotta answer the question of so what. So the relevance has been shown over and over and over. Sometimes you might hear relevance also referred to as authentic reading. It's very definitive that when we have relevance and authentic reading, we have increased motivation and engagement and interest. I'm sure you know a student that they got interested in a topic and then they just started reading like crazy about it. And that's what we're talking about too. That's what really is part of this. And by having these things, these elements together, that's what creates greater reading comprehension and competency. And I want to mention this because the other argument that I hear all the time as well is about programs in which students do cold reads. They're doing cold readings. And these cold readings are about 2 pages and they're designed to mimic, to parrot the test, whatever the test is in your country or your school district. And I want to ask you a question, and if you could just respond in the chat area. And the argument is, oh, we're getting kids ready for the test. That's why we want them to do these cold readings. Okay, so here's my question is, can you think of a time, when was the last time you did a cold reading that wasn't a standardized test? Can you think of a time that you've done that? Think about it in the last 5 years of your life. Have you read anything that was a cold reading that was not for a standardized test? Yeah, thanks, Liz. Liz is my plant.
Katie, the only time I can think of one was recently when I got pulled over by a state patrol officer for speeding, and he made me read the code. And I was like, I'm so nervous. I can't see straight right now. So, and it wasn't that I had to repeat it back in a true and false questionnaire after it, nor did it mean that he was going to be giving me a lesser ticket if I could read it. But even that wouldn't have been a valid reason to have me read.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's almost like an intimidation factor. So to answer M. Kim's question in the chat area, here's what a cold reading is. A cold reading is you know nothing about the topic. You have no background in it, no, and it's usually on standardized tests. You read the passage and then answer questions. And cold readings, the argument is that no one has an advantage, but that's not true, because perchance if it's about baseball, okay, I know more about baseball probably than Richard does.
She does.
I will probably perform better on it than he will, even though my reading level might be lower, because background knowledge plus vocabulary equals comprehension. And the motivating factor are the questions, and that's what helps us to dig more deeply. So what I'm seeing a lot of are these work texts, things like that, where it's a cold reading and kids answer questions, but that's actually not how we develop our comprehension. That's actually not how you read well. So here's my argument. My argument is that if we engage in this, we have a great essential question, a great inquiry question with texts and writing activities that are contextualized under that question, then whatever standardized test you give them, they're going to do really, really well. Because the fact of the matter is that cold reading based test that they're going to have is here, and we've been teaching them here. So they're going to be able to crush it. And there's also data that keeps proving that over and over. So I always say great teaching and instruction takes care of really bad standardized testing.
Right. Hey, I do want to throw in a little thought process here. When we're dealing with kids who live in poverty or come from backgrounds of poverty, we oftentimes think they don't know anything. Well, that's a deficit thinking model. Realize every single child comes to your classroom with background knowledge. It may not be the same background knowledge that you have or what is required for a particular reading. It is our job in a culturally responsive classroom to uncover the knowledges that kids come with and then try to attach them to whatever it is that we're trying to read. Now, as Katie said, if we look at essential questions, every kid has some experience with that bigger concept because everybody puts information in their brain in a conceptual manner. So every child has had an experience with change. So how does change represent itself? What things change? What things don't change? Those are questions that we should be asking our kids to uncover that background knowledge.
And the text is the vehicle to develop an understanding and to develop information and content to answer those questions. And the writing and talking about it is the expressive piece to share what I know and understand. So okay, cool. All right. So here's, we need to compose essential questions. So here's what it looks like. Okay. So most textbooks, I have to be honest, don't pose real essential questions. I call them faux essential questions or fake essential questions. And so we need to examine those closely because there's a lot of bad stuff out there. And essential questions are better when they're contextualized. So again, I've already shared this, but I'm going to share it again, is background knowledge plus vocabulary equals comprehension all the time. And we need student input, and Richard just shared that too. We need to have it contextualized, responsive to our students. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. So I have a topic. My topic is personal courage, and I'm using informational text. And my question is, what can we learn from the courage of others? And the concept, as Richard would say, is courage. And so I have a variety of texts that I'm going to use as a vehicle to answer that question. So I have Navajo Code Talkers. There's another Code Talker book as well, Behind Rebel Lines, which is about the resistance movement during World War II. Wheels of Change is another one. America's Constitution, and about founding fathers in the United States. The Galt case, actually in the United States, that was the case that really influenced the Miranda rights of having your rights read to you if you're arrested. And then of course, a classic, A Tale of Two Cities. So I might use Tale of Two Cities as my grade level mentor text and explore that question, but then invite my students to choose maybe one of these other titles as another way or another perspective to answer this question. And here's another example that I want to share with you. So the topic is Tales of Past Fiction, which I might see on a curriculum map. And the question is, how can the stories of your ancestors shape our identity? And then, of course, the concept in there is identity. And, what middle school, high school student do we know? What teenager do we know that's not focused on their identity and exploring their identity? That's what makes it universal. That's how it makes it, culturally connected and background connected as well. So here are some examples of some texts we might use. We might use Esperanza Rising, which is a winner of the Newbery Medal. And then Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which is a real classic. That one's taught quite a bit. Another one is Inside Out and Back Again. And then, of course, Julius Caesar, a classic. And so we can have new literature or new stories with maybe more classic canonical ones, but it is the question that is driving the reading and the discussion and the writing that's happening in the class. We're going back to this, but of course I'm going to be teaching literary elements. I'm going to be teaching about conflict, character development, theme, all of those things that I would do as a teacher of literature, but we're using these texts to get at that big question. And kids have opinions about their identity and how ancestors shape their identity. So by exploring these texts, we could have a student talk about their family stories and how their family stories have shaped their identity and who they are. And I encounter that most people love to talk about their background, where they've come from. One of my favorite things to ask new students is tell me the story of your name. How did you get your name? And everybody has a story behind that. I was named after my great aunt, and that's who I was named after. And I carried on a family name, and then my middle name was my mom's middle name, and then my grandmother's middle name as well. So that's where that comes from. And so here's one more example I want to show you too, is how do leaders ensure their accomplishments endure, and it's about world transformation. So this is about endurance. Transformation is the concept, and here are some texts to look at that. So I Am Malala as one. Daring Play, this is the story of Jackie Robinson, who was the first African-American baseball player. It's kind of ironic, Richard, that I've got a baseball story in here. There's Jackie Robinson again. I'm showing the graphic novel too, because we can look at the same story but in different formats. It can be in a narrative, memoir type format, and it can also be used in a graphic novel. And kids can still access that question, even though it's a lower level text. And here are some other examples too. And actually, this is, these are a lot of these, most of these titles, I know that Saddleback has. So to take a look at those. Here's one more, Civic Duty. How can an individual citizen influence decision-making? So probably, for that would be, the concept would be civic responsibility or connectedness to community. And so, here's a couple, here's one on Fannie Lou Hamer, Farewell to Manzanar. This is about concentration camps, Japanese internment in the United States. Miranda, again, this is about the Miranda rights. And then this one here is Abigail Adams. So I wanted to share that from a female perspective during that same time with the founding fathers in the United States. So if you want more of lists like this, and there are a lot of titles on there, so we don't have to worry about it being too American centric. There's quite a few titles on there. And if you want more, I have tons of these book lists. You can go to my website at engaginglearners.com and go check them out. They're there for you for free. There's a lot of lists in there, and they're not just ELA. Many of them have social studies, science. I even have some mathematical focus too, but they're a combination of young adult novels, kind of classical works as well, that always have the topic and then the essential question. So you're welcome to go and grab those. I develop them for you, for colleagues.
Katie, a little shameless self-promotion for you. I honestly, when I work with school districts and they ask me about any of this stuff, I pull up Katie's stuff right away. I'll tell you, it is refreshing to see the concept focus, that thematic focus, because that is really what gets kids interested. So when you shared that information about the baseball players, and then you had FDR, and then you had Amelia Earhart. And going back to even like you had the classic of William Shakespeare's Caesar, and those other books. So, okay, here's the deal, Katie. I'm a 10th grader and we're reading Julius Caesar we're supposed to be reading it in class. And we're going to be discussing that essential question that you have posted there. But I read at about a 4th grade level. I can't read Julius Caesar because I don't have the comprehension strategies. I also, Julius Caesar is written in Shakespeare's language, and it doesn't make sense to me. But I still want to be a part of this. What should a teacher do with a kid like me?
Yeah, well, that would be my grade level text, and I would argue that Shakespeare is even above a 10th grade reading level. It's pretty complex text. And you notice that I have an illustrated classic version that I know Saddleback carries. So that's one way of accessing the text. Many of these graphic novels are the whole original text, especially for Shakespeare. There's like No Fear Shakespeare. There's quite a few of them at this point. And they have Shakespeare's original language, but they're paired with visuals. And that visualization really helps and supports comprehension and understanding. And it also breaks down the text too into ideas, thoughts, who's saying what throughout the text. So if you think about it, the first books that we're exposed to are picture books. And there's a very legitimate reason why that is, because it helps to create those pictures, that comprehension in our head. So sometimes, folks may balk at graphic novels, but they're a fantastic tool, genre that we can use, especially with struggling readers, especially with second language learners, especially with students with special needs. And of course, it's going to apply to general education as well. And then I will also add to that audio assist is not cheating as long as it doesn't supplant reading. So we can listen to audio text. Again, it helps all kinds of learners, but especially our ELL students, students with special needs as well. And what it does is that then you have a model for the reading. But please, 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 I'm begging you, you don't put the audio assist on and plug in the kids and that's it. It's done in segments. Like if there's a really important piece that you want to make sure that the kids are understanding, then use audio assist, but it's not to supplant actual reading.
That was where I was going with that. Can I listen to the book? And I don't know if you've mentioned it, but you always tell me about this, that every child should hear a fluent adult read every single day. So the teacher actually reading an act or a scene out of the novel, out of Julius Caesar, is an appropriate thing to do, but not the whole hour. They
Absolutely
should hear
not.
in bits and pieces. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's chunked, and I'm modeling it. I'm modeling for students how I understand a highly complex text like Shakespeare. Just like in science class, if I'm reading a science research article, I'm going to model for students how I think about it. So it's more of a think aloud. So it doesn't become coverage of the text because we have to get through the novel or the play or whatever it is because the kids can't read it. That is not what I am saying. And I'm glad this is being recorded because I want to make sure that folks understand that listening to a fluent adult read aloud, think about when you were little and adults in your life were reading to you. It provided a model for understanding and how people make sense of the pictures and the words on the page. And even high school kids need that. They need to see how I think as a mathematician and how I read a complex problem. So So just that. But it also goes into, right, the phases of self-regulation. So model and observe, copy and do, practice and refinement, independence and application. So see, Richard, I do listen to you. Yeah. All right. So moving along here, here's more to, like, here's a science. So the topic is space exploration, nonfiction. Why is it important to explore beyond Earth? That's a 7th grade example. And so just one more bonus example. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Richard Rill, and he's going to close us out on this part.
Oh, okay. So one of the strategies that you can use in your classroom is just to teach kids different formats of questioning. So what I like to do is I like to teach kids how to ask these questions, not simply just answer these questions. So there are 7 different types of critical question structures that I want to share with you. One is called an analogy, and that's taking one thing and comparing it to something else. Now this one, what I do is I like to take a concrete object and relate it to an abstract, something abstracted. So in this case, it says, how is a car like an idea? Well, let's go back to that leadership question, that the essential leadership question about the influence and impact that a leader has, and say, in what way is the influence of leader like that of a strawberry? Where'd I come up with strawberry? I don't know. I just make stuff up. But that forces kids to have to think differently. The next kind of strategy is what is called a point of view. Now, this works really well when you're trying to identify bias. And this one says bias of an editorial writer. You could also look at it in a science class and say, what is the bias of the particular scientist that was writing the article? I have a little puppy who's running around my feet right here, and she likes to chew on cords, so I have to watch out here. So the analyzing the point of view of the particular author or the researchers that are writing the particular item is really important. Then next is what is called, Katie, flip the slide there. Because there it is, incompletion. This one is, sometimes you can do incompletions like 2, 4, 6, blank, 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 what comes after 2, 4, 6, but that's an incompletion. But this one is an incompletion in that we know the beginning of the information, as in, Mars is the new frontier, but what do you think will happen next? Who might be selected for that next journey? What I do want you to recognize is after each one of these examples, it says support your answers with reasoned evidence. Support your answer with evidence to whatever you're doing. So the next one is what is called a web analysis. And that's like, you put the idea in the middle and then you have these offshoots like spokes that go off of that. So geographically or graphically represent the effect alternative energy sources have had on the U.S. and international economies. These kinds of questionings that kids can draw out are really important for kids who may not have a sophisticated vocabulary, kids who have a difficult time explaining themselves, kids who may not have enough English to complete whatever it is that they're doing. So always giving them graphic organizers is a great way to do that. Okay, flip the slide. The next one is hypothetical thinking. I love hypothetical thinking because it really requires you to have to think divergently. So hypothetical thinking can also be considered very creative levels of thinking. So what if overland trucking were banned? And then, how that's going to impact the U.S. economy. Let's say, what if FDR were not a victim of, I think it was polio? How might that have changed his presidency? So that's hypothetical thinking. The next one is what is called reversal. So you just turn it around. What's your opinion about climate change, and then support the opposing position. Another one might be, okay, we're reading Hamlet. How might this story have changed if had the main character had been female. So you just flip things around. And the final one is an application of different symbol system. Whether you use numbers or pictures or just assorted letters, it doesn't matter, but you're trying to help someone understand something using different ways of doing it rather than just writing it out. And you can see how deeply someone understands something when they're able to draw a picture of it. So if I were going to have a kid draw a picture of change, what would they come up with? Now, some kids might just put a quarter, a penny, a nickel, and a dime and say that's change, versus some kid coming up with how a piece of coal becomes a diamond. Okay, so the levels of sophistication of their abstraction of concepts is really powerful when they draw pictures. Okay, what's up next, Katie?
Yeah, that's pretty I do have my mic on. I had to go.
Yeah, you do. Yes, yes.
But I know my camera's not on. Yeah. So, I think like this is a time too where we can answer questions or comments that you might have.
Sure.
I'd like to ask everybody, because we have a smaller group online today, is, what's your big aha? What's your big takeaway from what Richard and I had presented? And how does this impact your teaching? So what's your big takeaway? What's your big aha or realization? And how does that impact your teaching?
Oh, what about social emotional learning with RAFT? Okay, here's one of the things I want people to be careful of is any of those structures. RAFT is role, audience,
format, topic, I think.
And topic. I want you to be careful with them because they become too formulaic, and they may limit a child's ability to think divergently. And they're okay once in a while, but if you stick to them too much, it's like, we have to do another RAFT.
Yeah.
They're fine. But when you really talk social and emotionally, what I think is more powerful in that is that kids are making relevance, connecting themselves to whatever it is that they're reading or writing or speaking or listening to, is their ways of connecting to it. The ability to find empathy and compassion and sympathy for characters is a really good social and emotional developer. Formulaic things don't necessarily get at the deeper levels of social and emotional development. And as I said, the empathy, sympathy, compassion, all that stuff is a learned process. It is not something that we're naturally born with. We have to learn how to do that. So many of those components of being social, working in a community, working with partners, is a learned process. So we have to teach kids how to do that within the context of the content.
Mm-hmm. I would also add to what Richard is saying is that RAFT is a great strategy as far as I would use it as an introductory strategy to get kids to understand, audience and focus, and how different formats can impact how you express what you know and understand, and in addressing a question. So RAFT, like so many other writing across the curriculum, reading across the curriculum strategies, are really great, but it's all part of a corpus of strategies that we would use. And then the other thing too is that Richard and I have talked about it off and on quite a bit, is that there's quite a bit of focus and interest on SEL, as there should be right now. We're still dealing with a pretty traumatic global reality of the last 18 months, and continues on at least for the next 6 months. And so there's what I was hearing in the school district I was working today is that the counselors are just overwhelmed right now, and teachers as well, dealing with social emotional needs, as well as the teachers. Social emotional learning is not a separate thing. I compare it quite a bit to, in the late 80s, character education was huge. So it was like, SEL, V1, and then this is like the advanced one that we have now. And I was given a kit of posters that I needed to display in my room. And I was told that I needed to display those so kids would start understanding character education. And I thought, good Lord, I'm an ELA and social studies teacher. When am I not teaching that? And same thing with SEL. If we're asking, the questions that I gave as examples, like what are the limits of friendship? How do our ancestors' stories shape our identity? Those are rooted in our social and emotional being and who we are. And it's not a separate part of instruction. It's integrated within our instruction, I would argue.
Absolutely. And some of you may want to go back and look at one of our previous Saddleback sessions where we talked about self-regulation.
Yeah.
And I think that being self-regulated is a far better design than just looking at social and emotional learning, because the social emotional stuff is, as I always say, a two-legged stool, when really it's a three-legged stool. So social is the affect side, or emotional is the affective side to us. Behavioral is the social side to us, but the ABCs of self-regulation are then cognition. And cognition is three-tiered: self-belief, self-efficacy, and thinking beyond the self. So if I do not believe myself to be a good reader, I'm not going to focus my attention on being a good reader. If I don't focus my attention on being a good reader because I don't feel good about myself, then I'm going to lose or not gain what's called self-efficacy, the abilities to, or the understanding that I've got the tools that is what I need to succeed. And really, essential questions force kids to have to think more metaphysically beyond the self. So I think that self-regulation is far more powerful. And like I said, Liz, you may want to put up a link to that SRL and literacy. I know it's late in the day.
5 times fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and because I need to go to a baseball game, I hate to leave you all, but hopefully you all got a good idea out of what we shared today. And Katie, it's as always really great to see you, even though virtual. Liz,
Yeah, exactly.
Good to see you again. And we'll be back. I'm sure we'll be back. I don't know what
Yeah,
we're
Oh,
going to
yes,
talk about.
you'll be back.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something.
Yeah, I already
Well-
have like 10 topics in my brain right now, but
Perfect. Well, have fun, Richard, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, everybody else, you stay here because we're not quite done yet. Only Richard has permission to leave.
no, the rest of the class
Okay.
is not
No,
dismissed.
you guys are not dismissed,
Yeah.
because I have to show you who is coming up next week. And I also want to share the link to that webinar that Richard was talking about. So at this time, and every single webinar we have, we like to let everybody know who is coming up next week. And next week we have Dr. Sarah Fenner and Dr. Sydney Snyder coming. I know many of you know Dr. Fenner and Snyder from the work that they do and the books that they publish. So they are coming to discuss culturally responsive teaching for multilingual learners. They have a book by the same name, and it just came out. So if you haven't seen this one yet, you definitely want to check it out. Come to the webinar, hear what they have to say. I think you're really going to enjoy it. You can register on our website, or an e-blast will be going out, and you can use the link on the e-blast to register for that too. And also, I need to mention our new Go ELL Literacy Library is available. This is for tweens, and these are focused or built around content area genres. Great accessible text with some nice academic and content vocabulary woven in, and beautiful books. Shoot me an email if you need some more information. I'm happy to answer any questions. Now, we already went through questions and answers, so we don't need to do that again unless there's anything else in here. Let me just double check. Oh, great. We already have people registered for next week. Excellent. Oh, hi, Kathy Perez. Nice to see you. I just love these webinars. Okay, now there are no open questions. I think we covered everything. Now I just want to make sure that I put the link to the YouTube video in the chat for everybody for that last webinar. So before you go, sorry guys, I have to stop share to do this. So, so Katie, what's for dinner tonight?
What's for dinner? Well, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska right now,
Oh,
working. So I'm online from the beautiful Hampton Inn, right off the expressway. So I think it's going to be a Panera night.
oh, okay.
Panera
I
and
mean,
getting
that's fine.
salad. Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
just
why
got to stay
not?
out of the cookies. So
Yeah, that's very difficult. All right, let me see
yeah.
if I can do this. There we go. That should be the link to the webinar that Richard was talking about, the self-regulated learning webinar that we did. So definitely check that out. That's all posted on our YouTube channel as well, so you can find it there. Thank you everybody for coming. Katie, great job as usual. We'll definitely have coffee with Katie and Richard again, probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks or so. So everybody be on the lookout for that. And thanks for joining us at our revised time. Our webinars are going to be time hopping a little bit. So just be advised when you are registering for upcoming webinars to take a look at the time because they are shifting back and forth. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoy Panera. And we'll see everybody. We'll see everybody next
Nice
time.
plug for them. Okay.
All right.
Bye,
Bye. Take care.